Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, South Korea welcomes the UN's adoption of a resolution against North Korea for its alleged crimes against humanity. Seoul says Pyongyang should come up with measures to improve conditions in the country. Looking to appease furious farmers, President Park Geun-hye vows to soften the blow of a recent free trade deal with China on Korea's agricultural sector. Plus, a huge snowstorm wreaks havoc in the northeastern United States, leaving at least 6 people dead. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, November 20th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. We start with the United Nations' clear message to North Korea that there must be justice for crimes against humanity. In a landmark but mostly symbolic vote, the UN committee adopted a resolution that calls for the North Korean leadership to be brought before the International Criminal Court. Our Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
A UN Human Rights Committee approved a resolution on Tuesday which calls for the Security Council to refer North Korea to the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity. The resolution, drafted by the European Union and Japan, passed overwhelmingly with the support of 111 countries. 19 members opposed it and 55 abstained. The approval came despite last-minute protests by North Korea and its allies. Earlier in the day, Cuba proposed an amendment that would have deleted some lines in the resolution that says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un should face the ICC. The committee voted down that proposal. The original EU-Japan drafted resolution will now be put to a vote at a plenary UN assembly in the coming weeks, but while it mounts extra pressure on Pyongyang, it's unlikely to actually bring about any tangible results in the criminal court. Pundits say China and Russia, both veto-wielding permanent members of the Security Council, will almost certainly use their power to stop the North Korean leader being targeted by prosecutors. The two countries voted for the Cuban proposal while voting against the original one. North Korea fired off some sharp warnings before Tuesday's vote, saying the passage of the resolution would prompt it to conduct further nuclear tests. The vote came after a UN investigative panel concluded in February that officials in the north are responsible for systematic killing, torture, and starvation. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Staying on this very important story, and Seoul welcomed the news out of New York. The South Korean government says it expects North Korea to come up with specific measures to improve human rights by accepting the recommendations of this UN resolution.
The adoption of the resolution reflects the international community's concern and willingness that the recommendations by the Commission of Inquiry should be thoroughly implemented to improve the situation in North Korea.
Now, as you might expect, China, North Korea's longtime ally, has no intention of allowing the North to actually be referred to the ICC. Observers say China will almost certainly use its veto power at the UN Security Council.
We think the UN Security Council is not an appropriate place to discuss human rights issues. Referring human rights issues to the International Criminal Court would not solve the problem.
Now, in other news, a North Korean man who is studying in Paris is thought to be on the run from North Korean agents who apparently want to forcefully repatriate him to the north. French officials say the male student, only identified by his family name Han, has been missing for over 2 weeks now. Han had been studying at an architecture college in the French capital since 2011. Prior to starting his studies in France, he attended Pyongyang's most prestigious college, Kim Il-sung University. Han's father is known to have been purged as he was an aide to Jang Sung-taek, the uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who was executed late last year. On a related note, South Korean students at that university in Paris say they have not seen any other North Korean students since last Friday. This is when police came to investigate Han's sudden disappearance. Russian President Vladimir Putin, fresh from a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's special envoy, has been hailing the benefits of maintaining a close relationship with North Korea. A media outlet in Russia reports that following his meeting with Park Geun-hye, who is midway through his roughly week-long trip to Russia, Putin said deepening political as well as economic cooperation with the North will contribute to regional security and stability in both countries. Park Geun-hye and the rest of his delegation are scheduled to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Thursday for more talks. But just as the hour-long talks between Che and Putin earlier this week, they will be held behind closed doors. Now, despite lingering tensions on the Korean peninsula, South Korea says dialogue with North Korea remains a possibility. Unification Ministry spokesperson Im Byung-chul says Seoul is still waiting to hold high-level talks if Pyongyang drops its unjustifiable demands and shows some sincerity. He added the North can raise a range of pending issues at the meeting, including the resumption of tours to North Korea's Mount Gumgang. A second round of high-level talks was scheduled for early November, but was scrapped after the North took issue with the flying of anti-Pyongyang leaflets by South Korean activists. Now, as part of its ongoing annual defense drill, the South Korean military has been conducting a large-scale landing exercise off the country's southeastern coast. Military officials say the drills boost combat readiness and deter enemy provocations, including threats posed by North Korea. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
At the break of dawn, orders are given and amphibious assault landing vehicles infiltrate enemy territory. Marines hop off the tanks, secure a perimeter, and soon after, neutralize enemy firepower. Air-cushioned vehicles and transport crafts storm in with supplies and heavy arms, while the Korean-made K-1 tank provides fire support. This joint amphibious landing exercise is part of the annual havoc exercise, which began in 1996. This year's drill is the largest ever.
Our Navy and Marines get realistic training through this exercise for operations that play a decisive role during war.
The orders are given now 20 miles away from the Asia's largest transport ship, the Tokdo LPX. It is used as a command center, coordinating operations and giving orders to the people manning attack helicopters and armored vehicles. Over 1,400 Marines, 20 vessels, and other amphibious vehicles were involved in this year's exercise. Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Hwang Gi-chul, emphasized the importance of the drill during a visit to the command center.
Our military's core value dictates we conduct a powerful drill. Through that, we will be able to prevent enemy provocations and come out victorious.
This year's six-day exercise is aimed at enhancing the Korean military's amphibious landing capabilities and runs through Thursday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, a former Japanese leader has blamed sitting Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for Tokyo's strained ties with South Korea and China. Speaking at a forum held in Korea's southern port city of Busan, Yukio Hatoyama said Abe's visit to the Yasukuni Shrine last December angered Seoul and Beijing. The highly controversial shrine honors some 14 Class A war criminals as well as hundreds of thousands of Japan's war dead. Hatoyama says any mention of the 14 should be removed before any sitting prime minister pays their respects at the shrine. He also said Japan should stand by the 1993 Kono statement in which the Japanese government apologized for its sexual enslavement of tens of thousands of Asian women, including a great many Korean women, before and during World War II.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Two new government agencies related to public safety and anti-corruption were officially launched here in Korea on Wednesday. The latest changes come in the wake of April's Seoul ferry sinking, which was handled poorly across the board and exposed some deep-rooted corruption within Korea's public and private sectors. Our Ji Myung-gil has all the details.
Prime Minister Chung Hong-won calls them the two cornerstones in responding to future disasters and leading public sector reforms in Korea. At the inauguration ceremony of the Safety Ministry and agency in charge of government personnel matters, the Prime Minister said an integrated disaster response system was needed to guarantee the people's safety, and he called for agencies to quickly adapt to the new command structure. Taking lessons from April's Seoul ferry disaster, the Ministry of Public Safety and Security, with a staff of 10,000 people, will act as the government's control tower for safeguarding the Korean population. The Korea Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency have been placed under its watch as two sub-level agencies. Former Navy Admiral Park Geun-hye was tapped to lead the new safety ministry and awaits a confirmation hearing at the National Assembly, which is scheduled for early next month. The overhaul also sets up a new agency that will be in charge of managing government personnel. In addition to handling the human resources of civil servants, it is tasked with leading reforms in Korea's bureaucratic structure. Lee Geum-myeon, a former Samsung Electronics official who specialized in the field of personnel management for decades, was nominated to lead the agency. The formation of the new bodies comes nearly 200 days after President Park Geun-hye promised government restructuring as a follow-up measure to April's Seoul ferry disaster, which left more than 300 people dead or missing. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
There's been a huge backlash from the farming community over Korea's recently agreed free trade agreement with China. They worry the country will be flooded with cheap imports from across the West Sea. In an effort to cool tempers, President Park Geun-hye has vowed to minimize damage to the sector and modernize the local agricultural industry. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Minimizing the damage to Korea's agricultural sector for the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement is what President Park Geun-hye is promising to the nation's farmers. At an open discussion Wednesday in the city of Arirang, south of Seoul, President Park said the agriculture sector is one of Korea's key industries and that her government would be in close consultations with those involved to make sure their concerns are being heard.
이처럼 개방에 대한 방어적인 대책도 중요하지만 더욱 중요한 것은 우리 앞에 놓인 도전과 변화를 기회로 만들 수 있는 창조적 해법과 할 수 있다는 자신감입니다. 저는 지금 이 순간이 우리 농업과 농촌을 한 단계 더 도약시키느냐 아니면 추락하느냐를 결정짓는 골든 타임이라고 생각합니다.
The president also spoke about ways to revitalize the sector through the integration of information technology. She said the creation of smart farms where farming environments can be monitored in a more efficient manner using biotechnology would be a boon for the sector. While emphasizing the benefits of greater access to the Chinese market, especially for homegrown produce, the president said Korea should continuously utilize free trade deals with its neighboring Asian countries. President Park's promise follows a series of protests and rallies staged by local farmers against the Korea-China FTA, which will remove tariffs on more than 90% of all products traded between the two countries, some 20 years after it goes into full effect. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the next time you're at the supermarket buying hand wash or shampoo, you might want to check exactly what is in it. American researchers say that if it contains a popular antibacterial agent, you should steer clear. They say this particular chemical could damage your liver and could potentially even cause cancer. Our Lee Ji-yoon has more.
Should you be worried if you just washed your hands with liquid soap? Maybe. Researchers from the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine recently discovered that a common ingredient in many liquid hand soaps, shampoos, and even toothpastes can trigger liver cancer. The ingredient researchers are worried about is called triclosan. According to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, triclosan is classified as an antibacterial agent added to products to reduce or prevent bacterial contamination. Then how does something that is supposed to keep us healthy end up having the opposite effect? Researchers found that mice exposed to the chemical for 6 months, equivalent to about 18 human years, became more susceptible to liver tumors than mice not exposed to it. Others say triclosan becomes even more harmful when combined with other compounds.
When triclosan is exposed to sunlight in the water system, it's converted to dioxins, which are carcinogens.
The FDA says it doesn't have enough evidence to recommend an end to the use of triclosan in consumer products. The U.S. state of Minnesota, however, is currently looking into legislation that would ban products containing triclosan in the state. 이준, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. The United States is being pounded by an early winter storm, forcing school closures and wreaking havoc, claiming at least 6 lives. It did not look like November in northeastern U.S., where snowstorms buried homes, vehicles, and everything in its path. Sweeping through the Great Lakes, the storm raged into New York State. County officials there reported storm-related car accidents. One man was found dead inside a car buried in 4.5 meters of snow in Alden, New York. At least 3 people died shoveling snow, apparently from a heart attack. All 50 states, including Hawaii and Florida, saw freezing temperatures, and about half of the country saw snow on the ground on Tuesday. But the brunt of the storm seems to have hit New York's Buffalo area, where nearly 2 meters of the white stuff had already piled up, with more forecast to fall. Residents there were caught off guard. At one highway, more than 100 vehicles were trapped because of the surprise snowfall. The thoroughfare remained closed on Wednesday local time. Paris has confirmed that a second Frenchman was among the executioners in the latest propaganda video released by the Islamic State group. Its prosecutor's office named the man as 22-year-old Michael dos Santos from an eastern Paris suburb. The earlier named French militant was Maxime Hauchard from Normandy. And according to Le Monde, more than 1,100 French nationals are believed to be engaged in the jihadist fight in Syria and Iraq, with nearly 400 on the front lines. Police have arrested a religious leader in India, concluding a tense week-long standoff that had been covered live by local news channels for days. Former junior engineer Baba Rampal Maharaj, turned God-man, had blockaded himself and some 15,000 followers in a heavily fortified ashram, exchanging fire with police that hurt hundreds in the days-long operation. The 63-year-old is wanted for a 2006 murder case and for contempt of court. He and his followers are also accused of holding people hostage in the sprawling ashram and using women and children as human shields. Police have recovered the bodies of Honduran beauty queen 19-year-old Maria Jose Alvarado and her sister. Alvarado was to compete in the Miss World contest in London. The two had been missing for a week after they were last seen leaving a party in a car without a license plate. Police say they were shot dead and their bodies were buried in a field by a river, adding that they had the murder weapon. They said 2 men were arrested in connection to the murder, one the boyfriend of the sister. He is said to have confessed to killing the 2 young women.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2014-2015 ISU Speed Skating World Cup, where the second stage of the event will take place at the Daejeon International Ice Rink starting on Friday. But on Wednesday, the media day took place. And taking part in the press conference were Olympic speed skaters Lee Sang-hwa and Lee Seung-hoon, as well as the recently converted Park Geun-hye and a middle school speed skater in Kim Min-seok. Now, they all expressed their excitement with Korea hosting their first international competition in 10 years. Meanwhile, Lee Sang-hwa talked about her passing up on a knee surgery, adding that she's not 100%, while Lee Seung-hoon announced that he will also compete in the 1500-meter competition as well. And now moving over to the LPGA, where golf fans are getting excited over the final event of the season with the CME Group Tour Championship taking place from the 20th to the 23rd. And with the final event of the season comes the final showdown between Park Geun-hye and Stacey Lewis for the Player of the Year honors. Now, with Park Geun-hye finishing in third place this past weekend at the Lorena Ochoa Invitational and Stacey Lewis finishing tied for 28th, the 2013 LPGA Player of the Year Park Geun-hye trails Lewis by just 3 points in the race for the top prize. If Park finishes lower than 8th place, Lewis automatically wins the 2014 Player of the Year honors, while winning the tournament will obviously mean a back-to-back year for Park Geun-hye. And now moving over to some Wednesday night's KBL action, the Wonju Dongbu Promi beat the Changwon LG Sakers 74-67, while the two bottom dwellers in the league, Anyang KGC and Seoul Samsung Thunders, faced off. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, KGC off to a great start, outscores Samsung's 27-15, but Samsung rallies in the second quarter to cut the deficit to 44-37 going into halftime. Now, Samsung's Leo Lyons tears it up with a game-high 34 points, but he's the only double-digit scorer in the game, while KGC spreads the ball around with 3 players scoring in double digits as KGC hangs on to win this game 85-74. And now finishing things off with some domestic volleyball action in the V-League, starting off in the Women's League, where the first place IBK Altos took on the third place Hyundai Hill State. Of course, going into the game here now, just like everyone expected, a roller coaster of a match here with Hyundai Hill State taking the first set 25-15 before IBK comes back to take the next 2 sets, including a 25-8 third set win. Now, Hyundai Hill State bounces back to force a decisive fifth set where Polina Raminova's 39 points helped Hyundai Hill State take the final set 15-12 for a 3-2 upset victory. Meanwhile, over on the men's league, Hyundai Capital Skywalkers taking on Kepco Vicstorm now looked to be a rather evenly matched game, but the duo of Mitar Juric and Chung Kwang-in for Kepco. Too much for the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers, who lost Liberman Algamez due to an injury, as Kepco sweeps through 3-0. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, we are kicking off under milder air this morning as the daily lows are starting out in the positive side, and top temperatures will jump 10 degrees higher, rising above seasonal averages. So we can expect to have a pleasant day throughout the day. And brightness and dryness continue with a few patches of clouds, but beware that the flu and cold activity level is high to very high in many areas. So take good care of yourself to avoid catching a cold. So with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daily low in Seoul started out at 3, then the daytime high will peak at 13, while Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 16 and 14, and Busan will climb to 17 this afternoon. Now, as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will rise to 15 and 14, and Dokdo should see a high of 13. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV, and we'll be back throughout the day with many more newscasts. Goodbye.